Hey everyone, it's Lassie and welcome back to Virtual Paddock. Today I'm gonna do a bit of an experiment because I want to find out how the same setup on a specific car feels across a few different sims, like mainly in terms of how similar or different the handling is gonna be. And I will admit that it's a bit of a flawed experiment because I can't really get the track conditions to be perfectly identical. And even the setups aren't 100% the same, just because the setup options don't necessarily allow for that to be perfect. But I kept it as close as possible, and generally this is more about the obvious similarities and differences between the games. So the car that I've chosen is the Porsche 911 GT3 Cup, and I'm gonna drive it at the Nürburgring Sprint circuit, starting in RaceRoom, then switching to Assetto Corsa, and finally Automobilista 2. So let's go. Alright, so here we are in RaceRoom. I'm pretty much using the baseline setup, except that I set the brake pressure to 100%. And what I'm going to do now is 2 warm-up laps to really get the tires up to temperature. And then I'll do 2 fast laps where I'll talk about how the car feels, and the other sims I'll also talk about how it compares to the previous ones. Right, so see you at the end of the second warm-up lap. Right, so the tires should be warm now, and let's see how it feels on the fast laps. But be careful on the brakes. There's no ABS. Really hard to get the car rotated here. Generally seems quite difficult to really get some good rotation. It seems like at least this setup is more biased towards understeer. The reason I'm saying this setup is because usually in a rear engine car like this, you'd expect the weight at the back to make itself known. So far it doesn't really. Could have done better through that corner. Second lap. Slight bit of a lift-off slide. But it helped the rotation, I'd say. I'm actually down on my previous time. So I definitely describe the tendency of this setup to be more understeery, at least here in RaceRoom. Might be because it's a baseline setup, and typically those are kind of supposed to be easy to drive. As I mess up slightly on the brakes and on the exit. Right, so that's the Porsche 911 GT3 Cup in RaceRoom. And now let's see how it feels on the same setup in Assetto Corsa. Alright, so now in Assetto Corsa, once again I did 2 warm-up laps. And now let's see how this feels compared to RaceRoom. It feels kind of a bit more agile, not as understeery. I mean, there is definitely a bit more understeer than there would be in the Assetto Corsa baseline setup for this car. But it's not as understeery with this setup as it was in RaceRoom with this exact setup. It also seems to be a bit more reactive on throttle, meaning it's easier to get wheel spin in this version. Whereas on the brakes they're fairly similar. But in this one you certainly feel the rear end a bit more. Or the fact that it's rear engined, and thus that the rear end is pretty heavy. And generally I have to say that this setup seems to work pretty well in Assetto Corsa. I mean, the tire pressures, at least according to the Race Essentials app there, seem a bit too high. But apart from that, it's pretty good. Right, so as I mentioned, more agile than in RaceRoom. And now let's see how it feels in Automobilista 2. Okay, so let's see how the setup feels in Automobilista 2. Once again, I did 2 warm-up laps. And the tires seem to be pretty much up to temperature. And let's go. Right, so after those first few corners, I'd say it kind of feels like in between Assetto Corsa and RaceRoom. So a bit more agile than the one in RaceRoom, but not quite as agile as in Assetto Corsa. In terms of response on the throttle and how easy it is to spin up the rears, that's definitely closer to Assetto Corsa than to RaceRoom. But let's do one more lap. Really hefty over the curb. In some corners it's certainly a bit more like RaceRoom than like Assetto Corsa. Alright, so to sum it up, I think the best way to put it is that RaceRoom was definitely the most understeery. Assetto Corsa was the most agile. And Automobilista 2 was kind of in the middle. On corner entry it was a bit more like RaceRoom, whereas on exit it was a bit more like Assetto Corsa. And once again, I know that wasn't a perfect comparison, but it was more to get a general idea of how the different sims handle, at least in regards to this car. Let me know if you'd be interested to maybe see a few more videos like this, trying a few more different cars and in a few other different sims. Anyway, thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video. So, till next time, here's the downforce, and see you soon.